Over the course of about 20 hours of gameplay, I did everything there is to do in Spider-Man 2. Every side mission, every collectible, more crimes than I could count, and as far as the game goes, I even solved some crimes too. I'm not going to waste your time though by asking if you should buy the game. The answer is, of course, yes, but should you 100% complete it? And my answer to that is almost? I'll explain, but first, two quick disclosures. One, an early review copy was provided by PlayStation about a few hours before the game came out, so I don't get to say I have the speedrun Platinum World record, sadly. I am gonna claim number 2 though. And 2, this review will be spoiler-free. I'm only using main story footage from about the first 4-ish hours of the game, with some vague side mission or overworld footage occasionally, simply so that I can highlight some of the combat changes or the web gliding, only stuff that's already been shown off by Sony. Let me be clear up front, the time I spent with Spider-Man 2 over the last few days is some of my favorite time spent holding a controller all year, right up there with the birth of my son. I wouldn't have been able to put this game down even if I wasn't also rushing to fit an algorithm and make a review. The game from cover to cover is a studio blatantly showing off its chops, reminding the world why it's been one of the top developers in the industry for decades now. So why do I say it's almost worth completing, and why did I say the game only took 20 hours to 100%? Well, it's a tradition here for me to start with the worst thing first when I get a review copy for a game, so subscribe too if you like honesty, I guess. I don't have a son, by the way. But there's one collectible in Spider-Man 2 that is a little bit insufferable. I have some nitpicks on other small details, but this collectible is the single true sour spot on a game that I would put high on my personal Game of the Year ranking. I mean, if you know me, this game is just catered for me to enjoy it. So rather than having your usual Ubisoft-style tower missions to unveil the map like you did in the first game here, the map is fully available, with the catch that most of the side missions, your enemy bases, the little science missions Peter did in the first game, thank God not Screwball this time around, all of these missions need to be discovered in the overworld rather than via the map screen. What that means is some enemy bases might have cloaking software, so you can only tell they're there by the shimmering of light. There are floating clouds of sand in some areas infested by little Sandman clones. It's the exact kind of, hey, pay attention to your surroundings and look at how pretty the game we made is. It's that kind of stuff that I really adore, even if it still often amounts to you flying through the city, pinging your HUD with R3 again and again and again to see if, I don't know, a new photo shoot opportunity is nearby. But this one collectible only tends to appear when you're right nearby and actively doing that R3 HUD ping. It actually pings you back. And this means that the game sort of falls back into old habits from Spider-Man 1 in just this instance, where in that game if you wanted to do everything you would need to swing through every corner of every district in almost a grid-like pattern until all of the crimes popped up needed to fill out the checklist. Unlike those crimes where there were 7,000 of them per district, here there are only 42 of this spiderbot collectible in the entire game, and it only added an hour to my overall game time, but it is the only time, full stop, where I felt the game got a little bit fat. The entire rest of Spider-Man 2 is a cut above both of the first two games on just about every level. If you enjoyed the momentum and the speed you could build while swinging around before, you're going to adore how fast this game can get with the new web gliding. From the very opening minutes of this game, I swear to you, Spider-Man 2 is one continuous flex by perhaps the most talented AAA developer in the industry right now. Insomniac Games really wants to remind you that the PlayStation 5 is its console until somebody else shows up to take that title from them, and since they've made most of the console's exclusive lineup, they're probably right. In the opening fight of the game, you're flung in real time halfway across Manhattan, and of course, this is all in-engine because then they dare you to fly right back. There's a trophy dedicated to using the wings alone to fly from the bottom left to the top right corner of the map, and not only is this doable, not only is this easy thanks to all of the wind currents that rip between the high rises and across the river, you can do this in what feels like 60 seconds, probably less with some of the later speed boost abilities that I hadn't unlocked at the time that I got the trophy. There are a few other missions starting in the middle of the game that I won't show off that highlight this studio's absolute mastery of the PlayStation 5 tech that I really want to show you because they made me pause for a moment and take a lap. Even just the ability to fast travel to any specific point on the map and watch as the game barely even fades to black before picking back up with Spidey swinging or gliding at that exact spot you selected, it's again a cut above. And for the record, if you're new here, I'm not usually easily wowed by pretty graphics or cool next-gen stuff, but both in terms of gameplay and story, I'll use the cliche here, my jaw dropped several times. It was closer to me mumbling under my breath, "Oh my fucking god, guys, really? Really?" than an actual jaw drop, though. The pacing, which both Peter and Miles' adventures struggled with just a bit for different reasons, here it is superb, leaving you almost caught off guard when major moments happen in the story because you're not expecting Act 1 or 2 to end just yet. I obviously can't talk much about the story without ruining that whole spoiler-free thing, but outside of some very minor stumbling in the middle, where the game struggles with giving you equal parts of both Spider-Man when one is taking story priority at that particular moment, it does an incredible job at that balancing act. Even then, I do have to note that complaint is also written directly into the game. It's a part of the narrative, so that's kind of the point. I just don't think it's a great point to make when you have a game with two protagonists. To say that Insomniac took note of what worked and what didn't in Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart a few years back, another game that had the whole dual protagonist thing going on, well, let's just say that would be an understatement in a few different ways. And let's also say that based on what they're showing here, they are more than ready for Wolverine when that drops. The story finds a bunch of ways to continue putting you on your back foot, taking you down the journey you would probably expect based on the trailers, but it does so by twisting those expectations again and again, and this starts at the very, very opening moments of the game, which I won't show here. Every mission in the main story has a firm place. I can't say I could pick a single one out that wasn't necessary or that was too repetitive from prior missions. Every single one had a place. Both Spider-Man 1 and Miles Morales did a great job at building up its respective main villains, even if those villains were sometimes in the background a bit before taking over. And as much as I loved Doc Ock's turn in the first game, this game might do all of that villain building even better. Kraven may come off as a bit of a one-note villain, as he seemingly always has been. I'm not a huge comic guy, I don't know, but that's the vibe I get. But his aura and performance here sets him apart masterfully from anything we saw in either of the first two Spider-Man games. I'll admit I haven't been a huge fan of the Spidey games, mainly sticking to one musical sting and then mostly repeating that motif during key moments over and over and over again, but the droning of a war horn every time this dude is about to appear, it got me on edge just a little bit every time, because you knew that this horn meant that somebody might be actually about to die. It nails the stakes that come with every single Kraven appearance. The perennial string of returning characters from 1 or Miles continues down the path that 1 and its DLC began, building this ever-changing world where every villain's actions, every Spider-Man's victories and shortcomings, they all permanently change the city in some way. I never thought I would get a little emotional over a bird, but that's a testament to how well this studio respects its own past lore. Now, I do have some very minor nitpicks as far as the storytelling itself goes. There are a few times I would have liked to see the game take a bit more time on certain beats. For example, here, the theme of the game is balance. They tell you that pretty much immediately, finding that balance in life. It's a thing we've seen Peter struggle with for years on screen, not just this game's Peter, but Peter in all of the movies, and now we get to see Miles struggle with it too, as he keeps putting off his college application essay to do important Spider-Man stuff. I feel like I wanted just a bit more out of that particular story beat, since it gets mentioned a bunch on the surface, but then they never really go super deep into why Miles is putting off all of the important things in his life to do Spider-Man things. We know why, of course, it's the Spider-Man dilemma, but they don't ever really hammer it home as much as I would have liked. Now, since I mentioned Ratchet & Clank a moment ago, really quickly before I jump into the side content more fully, I'll say that the combat is some of the most fluid and satisfying of any 3D beat-em-up game in recent memory, thanks in part to this studio's continued ability to find new gears of frenetic action to keep shifting into. But, and I am the only person on Earth that will have this nitpick, I promise you, the combat was streamlined away from the weapon wheel of gadgets that Peter had in 1, instead giving you the L1 button plus the 4 face buttons as that's Spider-Man's unique abilities, so Peter's spider arm things or Miles' electric attacks, leaving R1 plus the face buttons as your now only 4 gadgets to pick from. I can guarantee this change is because not many players used many of the gadgets in the first game pretty much ever, but as somebody who firmly believes that that first game's combat is best when you treat it like a Ratchet & Clank game and constantly hot swap between all the different weapons while jumping around like a madman, I personally am a little disappointed that this game simplified things a little bit. Given that the first game sold like 30 million copies and is one of the most popular games ever made, it is the right call to appeal to the masses, and cutting away from all of the different super abilities is probably also the right call to curating the experience the team is trying to achieve with 2 different Spider-Men at once, but that doesn't mean that I'm not sad that I can't summon Spider-Bro to kill everything instantly, or launch enemies into the air and then drop a web bomb to stick all of them to walls in one fell swoop. Even the web mines are missing here and too, a small indicator that they've given up on the stealth aspect, which is kind of funny since one of our Spider-Men can turn invisible, but hey, it wasn't the team's strong suit to create engaging stealth gameplay, so prioritizing fluid movement and just showing off, that's probably the right way to go. And that brings me to that 20 hours part, since some folks will inevitably use that comment as either, no, this game is so much longer, you're lying bait in the comments, or they'll make it weird and complain using my video as proof that the game is too short for some reason. I don't know, y'all are weird. Keep in mind that longtime viewers will know I have this weird knack for beating and completing games faster than most people do. I don't know why that is. I don't skip cutscenes or optional text or anything. It just kind of happens even when I'm playing for fun. In this game's case, since it was also work, it helps that every second I leave the game paused or something while recording footage, that's like half a gig of wasted space that's on my hard drive. I totaled about 19 hours and 20 minutes of footage. The 20 minutes part is rounded up, it's probably closer to 10, but I didn't feel like counting all the seconds when I did the calculator math, and I didn't record the extra time that I got that one annoying collectible set I mentioned earlier, which added about an hour to my game time. And most of that 20 hours of game felt like it was main story. This felt like a 20 plus hour main quest, so I actually had to double check my math 2 or 3 times because I didn't believe it. This total runtime means that the side content has been cut back a bit, which doesn't sound like a positive at first, I know, but it mostly is. Instead of a million enemy bases to fight these same recurring 6 waves of enemies, bases here are multi-stage affairs with distinct objectives. For example, some bases will give you the chance to cut off communication arrays so that you can avoid triggering reinforcements at all. They're more thought out, more respecting of your time, and it makes them even more enjoyable to complete. Some of the new side content includes timed protect the base missions, and the timers are only 1 to 3 minutes long. Again, they really respect your time here. In an era where more and more open world games continue to stretch content out just to keep you hooked for as long as they can, I actually respect that this one chooses quality, especially with how replayable Insomniac's games always are. That said, I do want to quickly note that like with a lot of Sony games in recent years and Spider-Man 1 before it, Spidey 2's New Game Plus is coming in a patch in the next couple months, they said before the year is out. After Miles required you to beat New Game Plus to get the Platinum Trophy, I'm kind of okay with coming back in December to play it again rather than playing the whole ass 20-something hour story twice in a row. I do continue to wish, though, that we would get more fully fledged side missions or side quests outside of the select few that appear in each of the Spider-Man games. Miles has some lower stakes stuff at the Brooklyn Visions Academy that he attends, and that helps, but again, we don't really see him in particular struggle with missing school to go be a hero. I'm guessing the game took place over a weekend or something, but with the entire second half of the map that they added, Brooklyn and Queens, I feel like there wasn't a ton of use that it got. Most of this Brooklyn-Queens area is just kind of there. It's used in 1 or 2 missions, some of it gets more mission play than that, but even a lot of the side content that's there didn't leave me feeling like it added too much. The coolest thing this new area adds is the ability to swing and fly across the river, because it never got old. It always felt really cool. I did appreciate that the side missions on this chunk of the map are a little more exploration-based, something like looking for a wandering grandpa who's simply retracing the steps he took on the day he proposed to his wife, or a mission that takes you through the forest area in Northeast Queens that I was sure wouldn't get any play. Some of these very missions are the ones that left me sitting quietly afterwards, just kind of appreciating that even the little human stories weren't just well told, they matched the game's theme of balance. It's no coincidence that Miles is usually the one on the receiving end of these side quests, these little nuggets of knowledge, Peter having already learned and also ignored that lesson years ago. Given that Spider-Man 1's DLC and Miles' game each selected districts of Manhattan to focus on and enhance, I'm fully expecting that there'll be some DLC for Spider-Man 2 that does the same with parts of Brooklyn and Queens, but that's not really an excuse for them to get glossed over as much as I feel they often are. My only other nitpick, and this is a real deep cut nitpick, but it always bothers me, this game does the thing that so many games for some reason still struggle with. There are audio diaries that you can collect in some of the side content, and these are only playable when you're sitting in the collections page of the pause screen. You can't play them and then keep playing the game, and weirdly, you can't even go back and replay the old J. Jonah Jameson style podcasts like you could in the first game either. So if they don't trigger or they're cut off because you started a mission or something, those are just gone forever. Now, I wouldn't be surprised to see that part fixed with the performance patch they said is on the way, but again, shout out to all developers, little piece of advice if you're listening, I want to listen to the audio logs, not sitting still. Thank you. I mean, I'm going to be sitting still because I'm playing a video game, but you know what I mean. Altogether though, each of these complaints is exceptionally minor. Spidey 2 is a leaner, cleaner game than the first one while still pulling the same overall game length. I don't remember, but it probably took just a tad longer for me to get the Platinum Trophy in that first game, but that's in part because of loading screens, which this game just does not have, and it's also because there were 4 million of the same crimes to solve in each district that were mandatory, and here, my Spider-Men were personally jerks who ignored the now optional crimes after the first few hours, since the in-game rewards were too small to justify me repeating them again. I'm a bad superhero, I know, tell that to my son. For this game to achieve a similar overall runtime while cutting all of the fat down to just the most enjoyable parts, and for that runtime to feel so much more filling, well, Insomniac knows how to cook. The only mark I would give against going into this game thinking about completing every last bit of side content is, again, those little spiderbot collectibles because of how tedious it can get finding the last one in each district. The reward isn't really worth the extra effort, and it's the lone part of the game that I think didn't learn from the first two games. But really, if you're already doing all the rest, what's an extra 30-ish minutes, right? If you've already put some time into Spider-Man 2, let me know what you thought about it in the comments below, and maybe make sure to put any of the spoilery stuff a few lines down in your comments so that you can spare the ones that haven't gotten there yet. If you're new here and you enjoyed what you saw, subscribe, please, or else YouTube puts me back in the dungeon again, and I don't want to go. Also, I'll probably end up doing a spoiler cast discussion over on my podcast channel Crub with some of my pals once they're done with the game, so if that sounds like something you want to hear us ramble about, subscribe there too if you want to watch that. As always, until next time, stay golden.